abiding by the time and rotating the microphones. So our next question is, what is one area where you see yourself having the most positive impact, and what is your plan to achieve that? Morgan, go ahead.
Okay, so I am on year 15 as a public school teacher, and in that time I spent 7 years in a Title I school district in Houston, Texas, in one of the largest districts in the nation. And since moving home, I have been able to work with students from all over the world who speak so many different languages. And the most important thing to me is that each student has the tools they need to succeed in their lives wherever they choose to go after graduation. And we know that kids who don't feel safe, who don't have basic needs met, cannot learn and cannot achieve at their highest potential. So I think that it's really important that we really keep focusing on our social emotional learning, making sure that students have the tools they need to keep showing the resiliency they've shown for the last year and a half. I think it's really important that teachers get professional development to make sure that they can help facilitate that. I think that we need to really look at our early childhood education and who is accessing those programs and what we can do to make sure that everybody can access those programs. A lot of people have been talking about our graduation rate and our MCA scores, and aside from the fact that standardized tests are biased in their writing, the best way to close the achievement gap for kids leaving high school is to make sure that every kid gets the same opportunities when they are smaller. So making sure that early childhood education, that pre-K is accessible, and that there's childcare available for when those hours are done. Making sure that transportation can be expanded. So how am I going to do that? I think it's really important that we prioritize early childhood education in our budget, hopefully as a school board. And also we have a lot of money coming from the ESSER funds, using some of those funds to bolster those programs. And then just continuing to work on our SEL programming, making sure that teachers have access to professional development, and continuing the work we've been doing with Wi-Fi and meals. So, thank you so much.
So I left you off at 29%, okay? And when I went to school in Minnesota ranked number 1 in the country. We competed with Iowa every year for between number 1 and number 2. And so we had an educational pyramid that had a deep, wide base, a core of math, reading, science, and English, and a little bit of other. And it led us to be number 1. And at some point along the way, there were structural changes that were made to where now that same pyramid consists of a very small sliver of the core studies, as evidenced by 29% of graduates being proficient in them, and a whole bunch of other stuff that the other candidates talked about. So, this is the deal. We don't know when those structural changes occurred. We know that it was over 10 years ago by looking at the Minnesota Department of Education data. And that comes down to informed consent. If I'm going to operate on you, I have an obligation to provide you with informed consent about the potential benefits and the complications around practice, and its medical malpractice. And at some point, the structural changes in the educational pyramid were changed from what led us to be number 1 in the country to number 17 in 2019. Now, why is that important? Because if 29% of our graduates are successful in the basic foundational portions of education, it's going to be a very painful life for them when they're working minimum wage jobs for their careers. And that is unacceptable. That does not have anything to do with the quality of a building. ultimate shot of the future, and they get that through a foundational base of education. It's what we need to return to. Thank you.
I share Mark's feelings about the weather right now, and I also just want to thank you for running, because I think we are doing good work in our career and college readiness program. So I'd be happy to talk with you, but when it's much warmer though. Okay, all right. So I also thank you, Morgan, for bringing up early learning. When I ran for school board 8 years ago, one of my platforms was to get an early learning center built in West St. Paul. I'm proud to say that we have that now, but it's clear that we need to invest more in our early learning programs. I think that's a great thing to do. You can read more about me online with a lot of the organizations that are covering this, like the West St. Paul Reader. I encourage you to do that. You'll see that my 3 platforms this year have to do with culture, academic achievement, but I want to talk to you today specifically about community engagement. I think it's important for us to improve the transparency that we maybe feel has been lacking in the last year or so, especially during the pandemic. As soon as the pandemic hit last spring, I was the first voice to encourage us to go hybrid, and I continue to share that message up to last spring when we made the decision to stop being hybrid for our school board meetings. I think it's important for us to continue to demonstrate transparency. That's why you will continue to see me out in the community. I've been to 3 Moreland events, 10 community events since September 1st. I like to get out, meet people, have people challenge my perspectives, people listen to my perspectives. I think that's healthy, good conversations. And even though I'm from Garlough Heights, I know 5 of our current school board members are from West St. Paul, and so I hope you consider, and I know this is 3 West St. Paul organizations hosting today. I hope you will consider those of us from other parts of the district to hear our voices as well. I appreciate and enjoy listening to all of your voices. And again, I thank you for organizing this. I thank you for your investments in our communities, to being here today, enjoying the weather like we all are. And I echo Sarah's message to please encourage others to get out. This is an important election, not just for the school board, but also for the levy. Thank you for your time, and have a great weekend.
It is chilly. It was chilly. I ran in the 5K earlier this morning too, so I see some shirts out here. Then I had to ditch a soccer game I was coaching at halftime, a little bit before halftime, to come here. So hopefully they won. I see my wife just arrived. I don't know. It doesn't matter if they win. It matters if they had fun. One area, I think that's a little bit of a false choice. I tend to sometimes not always answer exactly the way the question's asked, but I think find one person that has only one area that they care about in education. I think there are usually several. So I think it's flipping that question a little bit and saying, like, why me? Why would you be interested in supporting me? So I think part of it is my experience in education. It's not all the time that someone perhaps who's been a mid-level bureaucrat in education or has taught in education and has been in education their entire lives runs for a school board. But I am so passionate, it just seems like a good fit, and it's something that I want to do for the community. It's something I want to do for my kids, but also for all kids. And that experience runs from early childhood, and it runs through a college access program, and I taught kindergarten. So I think that breadth of experience is something that is helpful. School board members don't work on just one issue, right? They sort of have to revisit, I think it's every 3 years, they have to revisit every policy. So hopefully you're thinking about someone that's going to look through every single policy through a certain lens and be paying attention to all these things, because it's a hard job, I imagine. I turn to my colleagues on the school board. So number 3, I'm really committed to diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And I think there's an opportunity for an impact with 197. I think 197 has made a lot of great efforts in this area. They have the 4-way equity test, but I also think of this as not just equity. I think diversity and I think inclusivity need to be a part of that conversation. They need to be embraced. And I think part of that is because it all relates to community building and a welcoming environment for our kids, for our community. And I think they go all together. Education is a deeply personal issue to me. I think this is a very positive sign that we have this turnout for this event. Thank you.
Here we go. All right. Getting through some technical difficulties and voice difficulties. So to John's point, there is no one issue that a school board faces, and I've learned that in the past year of being a school board member. I was appointed back in January, and I've enjoyed the time of being there. The thing that I've learned is how do you unlock the potential of every kid? We can recite stats, we can look at the numbers, but I agree that we can do better. There's so many kids in the district who are doing well. I have a kid who just went to University of Minnesota, super proud of him. Several years ago, my wife and I adopted 2 beautiful children from Grenada, and they came to us with different challenges and different learning abilities, and we've had a partnership with our teachers to help us figure out how to unlock their potential. With our daughter, we've just watched her grow and excel and do phenomenally, and that's working with our teachers, that's working with our family, that's working with the special ed teachers to make sure that not only is she growing, but she's thriving. She's thriving, and she's doing well, and that's because we were able to work together. I have a son who has a different set of needs, and we're still figuring out how to unlock his potential. My wife and I can see it. We see it in every single day, but he doesn't learn in the same way. And so we have to figure out as a community, as educators, as a board, as a community, how to open our minds, how to open our thinking to change that dynamic so that we can unlock the potential of all of these kids. So I'm here for that reason. I'm here for him. I'm here for our neighbors whose kids have autism, who have different sets of needs. I'm here for the kids who have normal sets of needs, normal, whatever that means, right? For the kids who learn in the way that we teach today. We have to change our thinking and how we teach. We have to understand that there are social, emotional needs that's really important. It's not just a buzzword. Equity, diversity, inclusion are not buzzwords. They're things that help unlock the potential of those kids because they feel comfortable walking into that building every single day, knowing that they're seen, that they're heard, and that they're validated. I have a lot of experience with the Black Employee Resource Group at work, and my time is up. I plan to bring that experience with me as well as data-driven decisioning. Thank you.
Am I on? Good. Great. So, okay, I'm going to focus back on the question because this was another hard one because they asked us to focus on one area where we see ourselves having the biggest impact. And I kept coming back to my experience. And it's 4 areas, and get ready because they're very different. I never thought when I got a graduate degree in public health that I would use it potentially to help my kids and to help the school board. But I have a background in public health and in science, and I have been helping the governor's office set up vaccination and testing sites for 8 months, which has been the craziest, most rewarding experience of my life. So I bring that experience to the board. I've been in the district for 10 years with kids in various schools, and I have 2 very different children, kind of like what Marcus talked about. Every kid is different, and you have to meet them where they're at. The word thrive is like weirdly personal to me, and I love that word because it means something different for everybody. And every kid in the district can thrive, and that does not have to be the same thing for every kid. I grew up in a family of servant leaders. That's the only way to describe it. I was taught from an early age that if you have spare time, you volunteer. That's our hobbies in our family, we volunteer. My mom was a public school teacher for 41 years. She taught 3rd grade. I don't know how, but she did it. So it's in my blood that way. And then, what was my 4th thing? Oh, I missed it. Anyway, I'll think of it when I sit down. But I think all of those things put me in a really unique position to hit the ground running as a school board member. I've been paying attention to school board meetings for a decade. I've been engaged in 3 of our schools and gone to plenty of events at other schools. And I'm really excited and passionate about our kids, and I'm just ready to get started and dig in. So thank you for your time, and yes, it's cold.
I'll second the cold comment. Northern Minnesota boys aren't supposed to complain about it being cold, but it's cold. I will try to just focus on the one question. it is kind of hard for me. I agree with people. There's a lot of issues, and I'm a context-driven person. And I hold no illusions that if I'm on the board, I'm going to spend a lot of the first year getting up the learning curve. You can kind of do deep dives and reports, but until you actually are going through the process. So my response is, again, outside of that and getting outside of the minutiae, if you will. And in my board work experience, I find that engagement equals ownership. And so to that end, I know there's a lot of active people in schools, but there is a disparity amongst the schools, and sometimes I find out people don't get involved because they're not asked. So my end point with this is I don't have a PhD in education, but I've never heard anybody dispute the power of teaching kids to read at an early age. And I'm sure there are plenty of second and third grade teachers who say, wouldn't it be great if I could have one extra person at the end of my class session in the back of that room who could have 10 minutes to read to this child? And I know there are people who do it. I know there's disparity between some of the schools. So if I'm on the board, I would try to creatively and in a positive, encouraging manner say, where do those disparities exist, and where can I as an individual, or we as a board, or we as a district, try to get people into that school and start that process. And it might be doubly beneficial if people find that they realize our community is actually 3 communities and not Mendota Heights or West St. Paul or the northern part of Egan. And they will get to know their neighbors who might not be their neighbor, but they're part of the same community. Thank you.
Yes, I am between you and warmth, so I will probably keep this to 7 or 18 minutes. So, there's 3 things, really 2 things I want to do. I do need to come and learn and listen, right? To listen and learn and understand what the board is doing, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and otherwise, right? I don't have 10 years of going to board meetings or otherwise. The fact is I do have good ideas. You guys have good ideas, and so we have 100 people here plus or minus, and I would encourage you to what your ideas are, because it isn't going to come from me, it's not going to come from the people behind me, it's going to come from you and the teachers. So listening, learning, and then acting are really what I can bring in, and otherwise. I don't think I want to keep politics out of it, right? But it doesn't come from the left, it doesn't come from the right, it comes from people. And that's why I'm glad you guys are here. I expected 10, if I'm perfectly honest. So the second piece is on the budget, right? I am a CPA with an inactive license, so I'm that guy. And so what I have is more the budgetary mindset, right? Are we being efficient with the money that we're spending? I know there's requirements and otherwise, but there's probably some inefficiency. So maybe we can reallocate some money, and that's going to rub some people the wrong way. But the fact is sometimes things need to be cut, and sometimes things need to be improved. Particularly things that are working. If there's something that's actually working, why wouldn't we give more money to that? If there's something that's not working, why wouldn't we sunset that over time? I talked about the micro groups. I think we do need to fund that stuff, whatever that happens to be, right? If there's autism, or if there's other small groups, or if it's social, economic, or otherwise, we do need to have the micro groups hit, and so it's really hard, I think, right? It isn't just the 60%. There's a bunch of 1% individuals that we need. 30 seconds, everyone. And so from my perspective, that's where I'll come in and listen and learn. I want to look at the budget. I want to see where we're being efficient. Where are you guys getting your money's worth? Because if you're not, then it's my job to at least raise my hand. I think the last thing I'll say is, if every vote is 7-0 on the board, then the board should change. Because 6-1 is not a bad thing. 5-2 is not a bad thing. 4-3 is not a bad thing. If we have more discussions, we get better ideas at the end of the day. So if everyone wants 7-0, happy birthday. If not, I'm probably the 6-1, right? I'm probably the one necessarily, but nonetheless. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. My time is up, and I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Mark. And what you don't know is you have a time limit. I don't, so I'm really the one between you and one. But I'll try to keep this quick. I just want to thank Darcy and Beth for putting this on. They really were the backbones of this, organizing it all, reaching out to the candidates. So thank you guys. I also want to thank all of you. As a husband of a school teacher, we appreciate the community involvement here today. Coming out, listening to the candidates, getting involved with your schools in the community. We really appreciate it. So thank you all. I also want to thank all the candidates. Going off of the community, I think it's great that we have 8 candidates up here, all with such different views and backgrounds to bring to the school board. So thank you all for coming, enduring the cold here this morning as well. Okay, I'm going to run through the list of thank yous for everyone who supported us real quick, and then we'll be done. So the City of West St. Paul, the League of Women's Voters, your forum is Thursday, October 7th at 7 p.m. Just a shameless plug for that as well. And is everyone committed yet, or do we need to call anyone out here? Just kidding, I won't do that. Thank you all for, again, coming out. Please remember to vote on November 2nd. Vote for the levy. Thank you for Eclipse Music for the sound system as well. Darcy, anything else you want to add?
She really happy. I'm so appreciative for you guys coming out. I'm cold too, but I could care less. I'm just happy to see this community together. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Darcy. One more time for Darcy. I think all the candidates will hang out probably for a little bit here after. If you have any questions, I don't think they would shoo anyone away.
Off the property by 2 p.m.